As much as the unions have been exposed for who they are, their Democratic minions have been exposed as well. I mean, one of the things that was clear with Wisconsin is the Democrats weren't waiting to go, the Democrat senators, the hiding out here, they weren't waiting to go back because they were trying to negotiate some kind of compromise with Walker that wasn't coming, or they were making some stand of principle. They were waiting to get the high sign from their public sector union overlords that it was okay to come back, you did as much as you could, we concede the point, now you can come back and we'll pitch the fight somewhere else, like with this recall effort that's going on. But, so the Democrats' hypocrisy is exposed here too. I mentioned the civility, bipartisanship, right? Same thing the state senator said. You know, all we're asking to do is sit down at the table and hammer out a compromise. There was an election. As I recall President Obama telling John McCain during the healthcare debate, the election is over. And so Scott Walker introduced what we call a piece of legislation, and the legislators in Wisconsin wanted to vote on that legislation. End of story. If you don't have the numbers, vote your shares and we move on. That's certainly what we have in this state. As much as Pat Quinn was welcoming those Wisconsin state senators here, and as much as he was parroting their talking points, they didn't have any problems in Springfield passing the largest tax increase in Illinois history without a single Republican vote. Where's the bipartisanship there? They didn't have, at the federal level, they didn't have any problem passing Obamacare without a single Republican vote. Where's the bipartisanship there? It's a lie. They're bipartisan when they don't have the numbers, and they'll ram it down your throat when they do have the numbers. Another instance or layer of the hypocrisy, the lamenting of broken promises. Public sector unions saying, we were promised these things. And I, frankly, have sympathy for the rank and file members of public sector unions, even the purple people beaters, even AFSCME. I understand. You were promised certain things for work you do. You relied on those promises. You expect them to be kept. I agree. I think people should keep their promises, including state government, even the bad promises, because people did rely on them. But here's something that also needs to be part of the conversation. Those people who broke those promises, those people who made promises that they and you knew they couldn't keep, those are the people you support. I mean, what is the one constant? They said the pensions have been short funded for 30 years. They've skipped pension payments, diverted pension funds. Right. What's the one constant for the last 30 years in Illinois, regardless of who the governor was? Not Democrats, Mike Madigan is the one constant. So if you don't like being lied to, then stop financing liars. Simple as that. Mike Madigan is the one who made these decisions and now is pretending to have just been born anew and be serious about pension reform. It's preposterous. But it needs to be called out for the hypocrisy that it is. And people need to be held accountable. He needs to be held accountable by the Republican Party, by other people, by rank and file members of the public sector unions. But just that simple phrase. If you don't like being lied to, stop financing liars. And the last thing, in terms of layers of hypocrisy that I find particularly objectionable, particularly in our messaging, and so important to communicate our messages succinctly and clearly, so that regular people who don't pay attention to this with the ferocity that we do understand it, is this working family stuff. This is all about working families, working families. If you don't give me a blank check, you're against working families. Oh, really? What about the working families in the private sector? Do they count? The people that pay these bills? Are those working families? What about in Illinois, the nearly 1.1 million businesses with less than 5 employees, who represent 88% of all business enterprises in this state, and who are the engines of job growth and wealth creation in Illinois? Are they working families? Do they count? Here's the good news. Those people are the majority. So if we draw that line where we're on their side, we've got a majority of the electorate. We just need to communicate whose side we're on so they know. And then it's game over. And that's what they understand, which is why they make generic paeans to working families in spite of the evidence. And just to give you kind of an anecdote that drills this down, because we talk in billions and trillions of dollars, and I think people have a hard time distinguishing kind of, or really assimilating numbers that big. The city of Joliet, kind of a microcosm of what's going on in Illinois, and frankly what's going on in the nation. City of about 175,000 people now, working class, blue collar town, kind of saw its manufacturing base atrophy over the last 20 years, struggling. Does it sound familiar?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So in Joliet, which has a $27 million budget deficit for the next fiscal year, which despite getting tens of millions of dollars in casino boat revenue over the last 2 decades, is ranked as one of the 16 cities in this country, most likely to go bankrupt. The city of Joliet, the average household income, $48,000. Which is right in the Illinois median, working class, blue collar town. The average city employee salary, average, $83,500. Before you include the guaranteed pension, before you include the Cadillac healthcare plan that Joliet City workers pay $0 for. So what you have in Joliet is a city, or is a situation where every city worker essentially costs Joliet taxpayers about $125,000 a year when you include everything. So you have people making $48,000 a year financing people with guaranteed benefit levels of $125,000. Now, not only is that morally wrong, it is not sustainable. And so Joliet finds itself in this situation. It also finds itself with a lot of Joliet residents moving to Indiana. But in trying to close this budget deficit, the current administration, the outgoing administration, went to the public sector unions and they said, we'd like all city employees to contribute $100 a month to their health insurance to try and help close this deficit that we have. And the public sector union said, appreciate the offer, but we'll pass. So instead, the city council doubled the water rate on every resident of Joliet to finance the status quo. So whose side are we going to stand on? Are we going to kind of rationalize the public sector unions? Are we going to kind of mealy mouth who's right and who's wrong? Or are we going to say that is exactly what's wrong? It's exactly why we have been brought to the brink of bankruptcy at every level of government. And we're going to stand up and fight those people that don't want to have a rational conversation about simple arithmetic. The interesting thing, and you see what's happening in Wisconsin and elsewhere, is when you make that stand, it's not without incident. Certainly it hasn't been without incident for Scott Walker. But it's amazing how many people rally to your defense, to your support, too, isn't it? Leadership builds consensus. But even more to the point, there's a lot of people out there that don't have time to make their voices heard, or don't know how to make their voices heard, or feel like it's not going to solve anything to make their voices heard. But if somebody breaches that gap and is willing to stand up to the schoolyard bully, it's amazing the kind of support that you can rally and how you can change things and right quick. So the hypocrisy, the antidote to the hypocrisy of Democrats that I've kind of outlined is Republican consistency. We have to draw those lines. And so to my mind, I have 3 simple proposals, and the Reagan video recalls that Reagan used to say, there's no easy answers, but there's simple answers. And I think there's simple answers here. I don't think they're going to be easy to effect, but I think they're simple. One is, we should have politicians put skin in the game to lead the way. So I think that in Illinois, we should have Republicans introduce the idea that every salary for the General Assembly, members of the General Assembly, and constitutional officers should be indexed to the median household income in Illinois, $48,000. And for members of the General Assembly, since it's a part-time job, you don't get full-time health care benefits. Who gets full-time health care benefits for a part-time job? Nobody in the private sector. And also, too, the idea that you vest for a pension after 4 years, where does that occur? Besides the Illinois General Assembly. All that's gone. All that needs to be gone. You need to put skin in the game. You need to lead by example. The second thing I would say is we have our Obamacare moment. And that's that largest tax increase in Illinois history I referenced. That needs to be repealed, replaced, and we need to lower structural tax rates in Illinois, both the personal income and the corporate income tax rate, to make it clear to businesses the world over that Illinois is serious about capital formation, business location, and job creation, because it is going to reward entrepreneurs who take risks here. It needs to be central to our messaging. The third thing I would say, and I know we have Republicans in this state who are going to find this difficult, but I think that we need to say as a party, speak with moral clarity, that we are not going to take a single dime in terms of campaign cash from AFSCME, SEIU, or the teachers' unions. I think it's very difficult to say we're going to stand up to somebody if you're on that somebody's dole. So, it's our choice, really, before us. Either we take up this fight, the fight that everybody is talking about, the fight that everybody's looking at, a fight that everybody understands, because people understand, they may not understand $90 billion unfunded pension liability, but they understand I'm making 48 and they're making how much? And I'm financing that? Everybody gets that. And they get what's wrong with that. So we either take up this fight and show people who we are, or we don't take up this fight and show people who we are. And since this is a Lincoln Day dinner, I think the perseverance in the fight before us, should we choose to accept it, it certainly harkens to Lincoln. Not that this fight is comparable to slavery or to a nation divided, of course, it certainly is not. But the idea of perseverance when you know you're going to take some lumps. It's not going to be easy. You're going to suffer some political casualties, because we will. That's the reality. But remember, Lincoln had an unhappy marriage, ran a country store that went bankrupt, took 17 years to pay off his debt, lost 8 elections, gives me some solace. I've got 7 to go. And was despised by half the country. And yet how many people were inspired by what Lincoln did 150 years after his first inauguration? We celebrate him today. I think that answers the question. Thank you very much.